Yeah.
It was
Okay.
like,
We
it was like
we can
85, 90.
we can look at
around
at the ones that are
Toledo,
good.
just east of Newport. Then you got to Newport. It was
Can't
like
get a hold of the
75.
city recorder, can't get hold of the assistant city recorder.
But yeah, no, not as much as I'd like. I've been kind of stuck in the office here, so.
Why I try to arrive 3/4 of an hour early.
Thanks so much.
Well, I was doing nothing. I had to come a little early.
How's
I
it
just
going?
stopped
Busy?
by lottery
What button did you hit? Over there.
Good, let's hope you win. How much is it?
Oh yeah, that's all you can do.
Well, Oregon's up to 6 million, and the other.
Oh, there it went. Briefly.
Yeah, I actually was in Shreveport, Louisiana 2 weeks ago, and yeah, it was. We were inside most of the time. It was for a training thing, but yeah, it was hot. Yeah.
So yeah, you're on.
The funny thing was,
Is the last button over there? There it goes.
Hit by
Okay,
lightning
very
and
good.
something else all at the same time. It's better.
It was like 90 probably with 90% humidity, which is hot, but it wasn't like we
And
weren't out
furthermore,
all day. Like we did go out to town at like 8 o'clock at night.
you didn't have John McLaughlin, some guy.
I
like that evening heat on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Having a disagreement about, I don't remember what it
But not during the night.
was. Maybe it was a long time.
Looks like.
Angles here.
Let's see.
Pete broke it.
Happily take
Going
a
to try
baseball
join
bat.
forces with Karen Morley. She's the
And go back to
historian and
paper.
also is friends of the Mount View Cemetery.
Every time I hit
So
open,
I'm gonna
it
see, and
just
she's
spins and then gives me an arrow.
She's
What's going on?
knowledgeable about plants. She just is a historian. She's deciphering all these handwritten. What about this?
This, keep it, keep it.
She's the best goofy history. She lives in town. And
Okay.
so close to the only people that were buried in Natus.
What?
Were the Catholics in town, and they got their own graveyard. And it was, she says that she can't wait till figure out if it ever got granted or anyone was ever buried that was the old high school grounds.
Did you notice that
Tried in,
there's a Native American lives on
tried in Explorer.
No, there used to be a family that lived at the
They've
canyon.
erected a totem pole recently.
Oh, I've seen it. I know exactly which house it is. His sons put it up for their father.
I'm sure.
They built it.
I thought they were Native American before they
It's working in Explorer, I think.
walls around the place.
Maybe it needs to age.
There's actually
Well,
was a
you
woman.
used to be able to just have a generic log on, and you just write presenter and then presenter, and it would just come up and it would let you open, and now that's no longer a possibility.
Curiosities.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Along my look like a graveyard around my house.
Okay.
Goofy little junk. I throw all kinds of crap in my kids. My kids say I'm a hoarder. I just can't seem to throw anything away until it
Yep, there we
dies
go.
in the ground. No, hello.
My shrink has a hoodie.
Ah! My kids would say, "You need a mom." I'm going to steal all my mom's stuff in the house. Oh God.
Do you do any motions or voting or anything?
My wife wants me to
Voted on like one thing last year. Yeah,
Hey, what?
there hasn't been a whole lot.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that, so
about
I
CLNs.
don't remember off the top of my head what it would
What?
have been about. I think
What?
it was probably
What?
voted on,
Speak about what?
Whether we should pass it. The planning
See?
commission.
Oh,
I'm half deaf.
Okay, I think all the screens are working properly, and you guys have a presentation that I need to pull up on the screen here, or
There's a button for it.
Okay.
I want to go to the
Okay.
agenda.
just gonna be, okay, so we don't actually need the projector? Okay. That's all right.
You're friendly.
Oh, good.
Looking for
Oh dear.
my goodness.
One moment.
your pen?
Okay. Shall I go ahead and proceed?
Like a little flashlight.
I think he was giving the wait 1 minute sign.
You gotta either get one of those, they change them all the
I
time.
think that's
for the
finger I
hours.
saw.
One moment. Okay, anytime.
Okay. I'm calling the meeting to order. Would like any roll calls? Jeanette?
Yep, Matt Cool, present.
Trent Warnes,
Doug Neely?
Jerry Herman?
Dorothy Dalsred?
Bill Clark.
Okay, very good.
Dee Dee.
Nancy is not here, but I believe she was excused. I believe she informed us that she would not be here.
Yeah, she's,
Is there anybody else that I'm not thinking about?
oh, I think that's it.
Okay. And Pete Walter is here. Okay, so we'll go on with our, got a couple of presentations that are being made. Is there anything that anybody wants to alter on the agenda?
Let me see the agenda for a second.
All right, with that, Portland General Electric and Oregon City Public Works
All right.
presentation on street lighting.
Good deal.
And both come up and introduce yourselves. We all know one of you, but we may not all know the other one.
Thank you. I was going to say mayor.
If you say that, then you have to proceed it by has been.
Thank you, Doug. So I know pretty much this group. I haven't met you two. I'm John Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director. So, and I was informed by way of kind of some conversations between Pete and I that maybe you might want to hear from both PGE and Oregon City. So Kevin Muck is the PGE Outdoor Lighting Supervisor.
Yep.
And we haven't collaborated at all on what we're going to say to you tonight. But I would say this about some of the lighting work that's happened over the years. I've been with the city about 13 years now, and we had all high-pressure sodium lights, which were the industry standard. And when PGE went to they finally adopted, it felt like finally, adopted a LED streetlight standard that they wanted to move forward. Oregon City was really kind of one of the first that went there, at least in Clackamas County. And so we've, for the most part, gone through an LED light conversion in Oregon City. That doesn't mean everything's LED light in the city, but the majority is LED light converted. So not really knowing what the NRC was interested in, we kind of assumed dark sky. I had hoped to have dark sky related kinds of concerns. I had hoped to have a little more information or a little more accurate information on those lights that the city owns and maintains. So Kevin will talk about kind of the PGE lights and the structure that PGE works with the city. We also have some lights, most of the decoratives, in fact. So the acorn lights and the teardrop lights are, those are owned by the city. They're usually on a meter. So most of those have been put in place through a project, like a boulevard project, where we redid the boulevard. We put in new street lights. We put in the power that goes along with them, and we meter those. And for the most part, most of those projects happened before PGE had a adopted standard for decorative light. And so since then, PGE's come up with, that's another thing they've come up with, is a decorative light standard. So there are some decorative lights in Oregon City that are PGE authorized and used. And but I don't have good counts for you today, and that's kind of what I wanted to have. But I can answer a lot of questions, hopefully. And if not, I can always come back. And especially if there's questions Kevin can't answer, he can get them for us, and I can deliver those and save him a trip out here. So with that, I'll turn it over.
So I'm Kevin Muck. I've been the lighting supervisor just kind of post the conversion. So my boss now was the lighting supervisor before then. And so the conversion's been 4.5, 5 years ago, once we actually started implementing and got it done. You guys have, or Oregon City has about 3,000 lights that PGE owns and maintains that are under there, and those are almost all predominantly Cobra headlights, kind of standard roadway lighting that you see going on there. That's the conversion that we did. So the conversion we offered was that type of light, and as John said, we didn't really have a decorative option at that point. At that point, it was really still pretty expensive. The technology was fairly new, and the lights were pretty expensive to buy. We do have a smattering of town and countries. They're kind of the Paul Revere style. Everyone calls them a little bit something different that we own and maintain for the city. But most of the decorative acorns and all of that, as John says, either you guys, well, they're all yours. Some we maintain, and some the city owns and maintains cheaply. So we are looking at some decorative options. Some of the decorative styles are dark sky challenging. Some you just can't. They're just not dark sky compliant. They're not. They have more than 5% uplighting. We look at dark sky compliant as 100%. 5% is kind of the industry standard. And so that's kind of where we're at. I can kind of listen to some of your questions. I have answers for probably some of them as far as sky glow and dark sky. And then the other stuff I can come back with you.
And just so you know, the dark sky, most of the Cobra headlights are dark sky because there's very little. So dark sky generally means if you looked at the city from space, how much light would you see emitting up into that area? It also has some bleed off and some of the glow reflectivity that happens as well. But pretty much the Cobra heads, they used to have kind of a drop down where that light would drop down below the metal part, and that's all changed with the LED lights. They're all flush mount, so there's very little, if any, upbleed from those. The decorative lights, the acorn lights that we have, for the most part, are more of a globe sitting inside of a glass ball, essentially. So they're definitely not dark sky compliant. We have been doing some conversions. So some of the problems we have with those acorn lights, especially if you're familiar with the lighting along Malala Avenue, most of those they've got a clear globe on the top and the bottom, and they're the bulb. They get hot, and when they get hot, they burn up the ballast. And so we've been, over the years, replacing those, and then more recently we found a fixture replacement that replaces the whole head and includes an LED light in it, and it's designed such that it doesn't generate nearly the heat that the other high-pressure sodium lights were creating. But there's definitely a noticeable difference, especially when, like Malala, that kind of looks, as you drive down it, to me, a bit like a runway, right? They're spaced pretty regularly, and so you take one of those and convert it, you're going to notice it. And we've heard complaints about some of that, but they're not cheap to upgrade, so we kind of do that as they go out. But anyway, that's the dark sky element. So.
And I noticed that too, the LED lights, and the light seems to be directed very much downward. My recollection, John Williams was mayor when the Amtrak station went in, and those have the acorn lights, right? My recollection, and it is a recollection, that Nancy Krushauer, who was public works director at that time, indicated that it might be possible to cap the top of those to actually reflect the light downwards. Is that a possibility or not? Or is that?
It's not unless you do the full conversion because of the heat that's generated from those lights. And so you put a cap on it and you end the life of that pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And so that's, again, why we're in my slide presentation that's not complete yet. I've got pictures of those, but the new versions actually have a dark cap on the top. So they not only look different at night because they don't have the dark sky element, they look different during the day. And that's been another little problem for us is folks don't like the fact that they don't match. But so they've got the cone that you see, the ornament on the top, and then the cone, and then inside that is really the guts of the LED light that dissipate the heat, but also the lights are kind of connected to those, and that all shines down. And so that's what we want to get to. I don't know if we've done any in the Amtrak station. That's kind of another thing is we're struggling a little bit with our inventory and just having accurate counts of all those, but we'll catch up with that if that's the interest. That was another thing is we didn't really know what you guys were wanting to know about.
Well, because of the lighting that's there, the Amtrak station, which stands out at night on Highway 213,
Yeah, it does. It's bright. That's a bright
the biggest
facility.
plume of light that you see from the cove, believe it or not. If you look to the east, I didn't realize how much it may be fog too during the fall, but boy, does that really drift the light.
Yeah, it's really difficult with any acorn that has a globe to eliminate that, even no matter what. So your only other option really is if you do a globeless style, you can still have a cage, and then the LED fixtures sit right up on top. So it curves over here, and the element is flat, so it's almost like the new Cobra head style, and it goes completely down. And then without the globe, you don't have that light diffusing out. So if you're looking for pure dark sky acorn replacement, which some would argue this is not traditional acorn looking, that's kind of your only option right now. The second best is what John described, but you're still, even if you have the dark cap, you can't completely eliminate that uplighting. It will certainly reduce it.
Well, that depot we have is a historic. It was originally a freight depot that was in
Yeah.
Oregon City. Went to Portland. We came back here, and I think the intent there was to have lighting that was more consistent with an old building. And from what you've indicated, the new acorn lights would not really give that kind of
Not
historic
completely,
glare.
no. I would say not completely, no. There's kind of a hybrid. You'll see a lot of the modern lights, some call them China hat. They're just kind of a flat flying saucer type disc with some cage. And some of these are more traditional looking, but without the globe, they definitely do not look as traditional as what you're talking about. So I think a lot of people are running in that challenges of saying, do we just say at this point we can't have really dark sky because we just don't have that technology to really do that. Like I say, as soon as you introduce the globe, it diffuses up a little bit. So that's your challenge.
Any other questions, Dee Dee? You always have questions.
Maybe I'll hold back this time. Actually, I would be interested in seeing a presentation.
Yeah.
And an example of some
Right.
lights. I know this much of dark sky, so I'd like to learn more about it.
So if I can ask a question, so to help me prepare for that, and John and I will be working together, but when you say a presentation, so I kind of heard two things. So an example of lights, and then you mentioned dark sky. Are you looking for a presentation that's kind of addressing what the dark sky issues are and how to mitigate that? Or do you want more of an example of what PGE offers in way of that? Although much of your lighting is really city-owned. Some of it is PGE maintained, although you may change that if you go LED. So I was trying to just get a direction. Maybe you're not even sure. Maybe it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, both, if we could. And,
Okay.
and do we have like a before and after of
I have
our
a-
dark
so I-
sky?
I just had
It would be
a-
interesting to see what
I
what
do have
improvements we
some.
have
I just
made.
saw a really interesting presentation. They haven't given me the material yet from the Department of Energy. It was put on by some folks at the Pacific Northwest Light Lab, which is here in Portland, which is actually, it's up in Beaverton, Hillsborough area. And they have a really interesting dark sky night glow that we just saw about a week and a half ago, and had some really interesting things. One of the things that I'd passed on to Jerry was there's some overhead views, and Portland's actually a little bit darker now than it was before we put the LED lights in, and that's a couple factors. We have less light going down, and we eliminated the drop lenses, which has a lot of uplight, but there is some really interesting before and afters, and once we get that presentation, I could certainly include that in there.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Jerry.
No, you go ahead, Mark.
I was just off top, percentage-wise average, like what kind of energy savings is there?
The energy savings for LEDs from HPS to LED, depending on what you get, are somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 60%. And we lowered the light output levels, the lumens that the fixture's throwing out, to about 40% of the HPS level. Excuse me, sorry. There is more blue light, which people talk a lot about, and that. And the blue light is picked up more by our eyes, so it appears brighter and glarier. So for the same amount of light, if you had 100 lumens and 100 lumens here, the 100 is really low for a lumen count, but let's just say those numbers. The one with the more blue content, and just generally there's all kinds of blue content, it will appear brighter and glarier to our eyes. The wavelength is picked up by us and it scatters more in our eye. But the overriding factor between glare is light output. So if you had a very blue light that was 50 watts or 50 lumens and one that was very warm, like warm LED, yellowish kind of color maybe, at 100, the 100 in the colors that we think are better would still be glarier to us. So the overriding factor is output followed by color temperature is the thing. So.
One thing about color, I'm not sure if you all lived in town or were noticing when they did the conversion, but I noticed the fact that it seemed a lot more mysterious in Oregon City.
We noticed immediately on our street.
It was like
All
I
of a
was-
sudden,
I started thinking of my neighbors differently all of a sudden.
Everything was silhouetted a little bit more.
It's kind of, I mean, that you talk about blue, to me, it just seemed a little whiter. It was, than it is blue,
Yeah.
white. I mean, they're kind of the same thing, but I don't know if you've been to other communities in California in particular. They're almost yellow. I mean, you drive down their streets and they look almost yellow. I didn't feel like we were that yellow before, but with the white, it's definitely a lot more kind of. It almost had a fog in the snow. It seems more vibrant.
The pictures are dramatic when you see them. So I would say I use blue probably too literally. The lights that we have there are 4,000 K color temperature. That's not really a temperature. It's just related to when you heat a metal up, tungsten, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they're on the whiter side. There's less blue than some. The new trend in the industry is probably about 3,000, which starts to be, HPS is about 2,700, what you usually have here. So it's yellow, and these are pretty much white, like John said.
HPS.
High pressure sodium, sorry.
Yeah.
That's the lights you guys had previously, and then still doing the decoratives. So that's kind of that yellowish color. And then if you saw the side-by-sides, which that presentation will have, and I can get, it looks like John says. It looked very white, and the other would look very much like this, very yellowy with hot and what we call hot spots because of the way the light works. You'll have a very bright spot under the light, and then it'll be dim between the lights, and that's actually one of the more dangerous environments to drive in, to have that bright, dark, bright, dark. LEDs tend to homogenize that in a much nicer fashion. So,
This is a slide that I'll just pass around, but that's kind of the start. So that shows, that's a light that we changed in our Acorn light on the stairway and down by the falls here. So, I mean, that shows a pretty good difference between the whiter and the brighter. The other thing I'll say about our decorative lights, and we'll bring this back, but I just feel like since we're here, you've got the time to talk about us, right? Talk to us, not talk about us, but talk to us. So the other thing with our high pressure sodium is a lot of them are pretty aged. So that globe, lots of them aren't glass; they're a plastic. So with the UV and the light and the heat and the dust, there's not a lot of light getting through them anymore. So as we replace them, not only are we replacing them with probably a whiter light, we're replacing them with a brand new globe.
Yeah.
And so it's night and day difference between those two. And I think, again, when you're looking at a bank of the old ones and then one that just happens to show up because it's out, it's obvious, and people are frustrated. I know people get frustrated with that. So we deal with the calls. We try to explain those, but for us, it's mostly a funding issue. Trying to fund those changes are costly and time consuming. We're working through that, and normally there's an electrician involved. Although I think the version we're looking at might allow us to do it. I can't quite recall how that goes, but so that's an issue. The other thing that we've been dealing with a little bit is just are some of these new subdivisions with the setback requirements that are much less. So you're seeing houses that are very close to the street. How do those, especially if you got a 2-story house that's much closer, how does that impact that property owner that's sitting there? And sometimes, folks get really frustrated with street lighting sometimes. So we have to deal with those calls from time to time. And so I wasn't sure if that was a focus area, if this was all just dark sky. Anything you could do to help point us? Is it just the Amtrak station? Do we want to focus on that area? It might help us with comparable photos. If we're just talking about acorns, like I said, we're mostly in the acorn business, PG to a lesser extent, so that might help. So we're here to please, but not tonight.
I should
Yeah, I
use
think
that
our
motto.
interest is primarily dark sky issues.
Yeah, we had a presentation on it, and it was kind of new to me. I'd never really heard a whole lot about it before, and so it was kind of interesting and to address those type of issues. I mean, the energy consumption and plan to rehab and redo the lights is interesting too. But I know that's just a part of city business and all that. So.
I think it'd be good to see too, like what Oregon City has done so far and what they're planning on doing kind of down the road too.
Right, is there a plan? That's my
Right,
question.
and if you're looking at from the top, which areas are glowing the most? Can we view it from the top?
Photographs from the top.
Yeah,
Looking
to
down.
see what's glowing most here, maybe, and say, well, those are acorns, but those are not, you know? But we have a really options to choose, and is that what we're doing? Or are we just giving our opinion?
So
we're not
one of the
choosing
reasons
that.
I think this came forward was some of us had a concern about the observatory at Clackamas Community College, which is still there. And it looks like it will continue to be there and operational. I'll explain maybe that later. But the questions had to do with dark sky overlays. I think Pete did a good job explaining where it's imposed and where it is not. And then Mike Mitchell from the Parks Foundation, who's a lighting expert, I think I mentioned this to you, told us about the extreme blueness we see when you explained it again, especially in car headlights, the new car headlights. It's really hard to see through some of that stuff. And I'm looking at this photograph that John just sent around, and the cliff next to the fixture is just illuminated. But in the other picture, it's not. So I guess one question I have, we asked Mike, is there some way to take that tone out that's so scattering? Is there some way to do that? He mentioned something about phosphorus additions or something.
Yeah, that'd be like
to the LED.
Yeah, it's just a new fixture, not something you can do with an existing fixture.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, like I say, the industry trend is to lessen those blue. They're artificially introducing phosphors in the individual LEDs to warm that colors up. Basically, they're not changing the light spectrum, but they're putting a phosphor in there to absorb and change the color that spits out. So yeah, I would say that you can warm those to. So Dark Sky International, very powerful organization, pushing very hard, and I think that in some good and bad ways, in my opinion, are pushing very hard for about a 2700, so a very, very yellow light. I think the industry is going to settle somewhere around 3000, which is a little bit of a whiter light. But we're PGEs right now looking at what our options are to get that softer color lighting in our spectrum there for that.
Without that filtration, what would it be? You said 2700 was there.
So right now we have 4000 Kelvin color
Okay.
temperature, CCT. And then we're looking at 3000. Like I say, those numbers don't mean anything except for one's whiter, and then as you go smaller numbers, it becomes more yellow. Basically, it's the bright blue part of the spectrum down to the red part of the spectrum. And so that's kind of what it is. So it's even like on fluorescent lighting, you'll see that you can get cool white, or you can get whatever they call the other one, warm, whatever, or daylight light, and that's basically the difference. Cool white, as I think, is about 4400, and the daytime light rides in there at about 32, I believe. So yeah, so you can just buy the light in that different color spectrum. Now we don't have any of those spec'd out because when we did this conversion, the industry basically said 4000K is probably what's best. But just like anything, we thought that 8 tracks at one time were going to be the new thing, and in this case, much like the 8 track, it looks like this color temperature is not the one that's going to win.
You may recall the original ones were mercury vapor.
Yes, we still have some of
Which then
those.
switched to sodium vapor.
Yeah. Yeah, mercury
You still
vapor.
have some mercury vapor?
We do. We try hard to get rid of all of those. Mercury vapor is pretty much out. We have some low pressure sodium. We have metal halide, which are actually very much the color of LEDs. So they're out there. Yeah, we still have some of those, but we are vastly HPS lighting right now. We have very few of the old outliers, mercury vapor being one. We never replace those in kind. In fact, you can't hardly buy them anymore. So.
I don't know of any in Oregon City.
Yeah, you guys don't have any.
Well, they were kind of white, like the blue LEDs.
Yeah, they had a different light spectrum. Like say HPS are the yellowest lights we have.
Right.
Does anyone know what the design for the cove is in lighting? I'm looking at our planner, no?
The street lighting or the
Whatever.
on-site lighting?
Yeah,
Well, street lighting is
4,000
PG,
K.
so, yeah, and they're going to be the. Well, the other thing we haven't even talked about is poles. So I think there are standard aluminum
Right.
higher mounted.
right.
You have 4 exceptions on that you guys approved. We had to get a little bit bigger spacing, so we put 4 poles that I believe are 5 or 10 feet taller. That pretty much match, but are taller to give around the roundabout. We had a difficult time lighting that effectively. So, but yeah, we followed your pole standard except for this, where we got an exception for you guys for a better lighting pattern, and then it's 4,000 K color temp.
So would that be 4,000 K with softening or?
No, it's
So the-
it's just purely
Okay.
so that white light.
Because I think probably 2 years ago, we asked the developer to try to use down-directed lighting, and I think he
I
is.
remember that,
In
yeah.
the code, yeah. But what, the question would be, in light of your area lighting that you're talking about, what will that do?
It's all down directive. Right?
Okay.
They're all Cobra heads.
Okay.
So there's no decorative lighting going on along Main Street. That section of Main Street is going to be your standard aluminum pole
Yes.
Cobra heads. So
Okay.
it'll all be downlit. It's just this question that I don't think PG has did I hear you right? PG doesn't have a standard for that.
We don't have a light that we offer there. We're just starting to get requests probably here and there. We've probably looked at it. So I go to a lighting conference every year and we know it's coming. So we've been looking how to adjust and how to get those in our inventory and what that means for us. Kind of like John says, it's kind of a tricky deal because if you replace one, people are going, why is this one this color and this one? And, we have 200-some thousand lights out there that are that color. So we're looking at it. But in this case, like John said, it's all dark sky compliant fixtures, but they are the whiter color than what possibly is coming in the industry, that little bit more yellow color. And even the yellow color doesn't look like the high-pressure sodiums that you presently have or had. It's still a little bit whiter than that.
So the trade-off is to get the maximum performance, the whiter the light in the LED mode, the better the performance you're going to get. If
That's
you start changing it to softer colors, shall we say.
The reason that they use that color spectrum, it's the most efficient watts per lumen output. The
Right.
efficacy of it is highest at, it used to be about 5,000. The light manufacturers are getting much more savvy, and but the reason they started with that color spectrum was you get the most light output for the fewest amount of watts in that color range.
I see.
So that's the reason that it kind of started that way. So in the beginning, LEDs, which was much more focused on bang for the buck energy savings, and so they naturally went that. So the warmer you get, the least amount of lumens you're getting per watt. It's not like half or anything like that, but the old drop from about 4,500 color temperature down to 3,000 was about a 20% loss. I think they've got it under 10% now, but that's why the industry started that way, is that the focus was almost entirely on energy savings, and so that made the most sense. But since then, a lot of things have come up, glare issues. In Florida, the turtles are going wonky because the light spectrum is not right for them, and they're crossing the road getting killed different times of the day or at night. So there's a lot of things that now people are learning about the LED thing that we're kind of like, oh, no one ever thought about this, and everyone's starting to deal with it. So there's definitely some issues, and there's some challenges that no one foresaw.
Are there any particular ones in this area that you're facing?
Not the ones. So basically, there's a ton of studies. Like I say, dark sky is very powerful. They're the ones who got the AMA article. If any of you are aware of that article, that was a dark sky person who got to the medical association. That's been refuted or argued and kind of criticized by the DOE, the IES, which governs lighting standards across the country, as being not wholly inaccurate but very incomplete. I think it was well intended, and I think sometimes you have to maybe push harder one way than you should to actually get it to the middle spot where maybe it is, and I think that's probably Dark Sky's strategy. I don't wholly disagree with it either. I'm the lighting guy, so.
Well, that helps. We'll come back with something that hopefully hits that target.
I'll talk to John, and I think I know some of the things you guys want that I can kind of cull down that presentation, and then I can also send the entire presentation to John, and he can disperse as needed. Then I can bring some of the highlights and some of the other stuff we've looked at too. That sounds good.
Appreciate your company's
Yeah.
response, and John, too.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time to come out
Yep,
here. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
Jerry, I don't see Brian here, but.
Yeah, this is,
So Jerry, I think you're the
Well,
guy.
okay. We'll start this. You can pass a couple that way, and I'll head out there. Make sure Pete gets one here.
Oh, sorry about that.
Didn't
Send a
give
couple
us
back
any.
there. Thank you.
He did. Okay.
Pictures. Pardon? There's a copy coming around for him.
Right here.
Hope so. All right, I really was hoping Brian would be here, and he and I went over this whole thing, so, but, okay. So what you have before you is an outline of something we're trying to do to change the tone of Waterboard Park to be looking seriously at the natural resource area and how significant it is. So I'm just going to go through this real quick here. My organization, Rivers Life Center, and Brian Boyce have been working on this for about 3 years. 4 years ago, we did the first discovery tour of Waterboard Park, and we're going to do the second one, hopefully with Dee Dee helping us, and all of you that can come on September 9th, which is a Saturday, between 9 and 1, because we think Waterboard Park is the most unique, undiscovered resource. We know about it, but there's a ton of people in the community that don't, and they think across the river, those people in West Lynn, where I grew up, are cool because they got Camesia. Well, they got Camesia, but we got Waterboard Park. And Camesia is a very unique natural history site, but so a lot of the attributes that you see in Camesia are similar in Oregon City, except for exposure. All right, river. So what we did was put together some time ago an asset list, which is the picture that you have on the second page. We took the concepts and assets that we defined, we brought them forward, took them to the Fledgling Parks Foundation. I'm a member of the Parks Foundation board, so is Brian. And the dates are not important here, except to say that we also met with John Lewis from Public Works, and the Oregon Parks and Recreation Director at that time was Scott Archer. And then when Phil Lewis came on board, we spent some time with him. Contract was made with Dr. Scott Burns. This is kind of important here because we asked him, he's the professor emeritus of geology at PSU, and he's highly regarded and seen as a real expose person on natural history and so forth. Did he see anything unique about Waterboard Park? He brings students here sometimes. He used to. His staff still do that. And the question was, is there something that could be done in this park different than other parks in Oregon City that would build upon its natural history, significance? And he said, you said the right word, it should be a significant natural area, a significant geologic and natural area. And we said, what does that mean? He said, the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries has such a designation in Oregon. And there's just a few places in Oregon at this time that are so designated. And he said, you might want to reach out to them and find out what their status is, and I will help you if there was some desire of the community at large to advance Waterboard Park in a new way towards that kind of designation. All right. So Dr. Burns recommended we talk to Dogami, Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. We did. They had one particular question to us. Do we have any legislators or former legislators around? Because they're the ones that get things done for us. And, you know, there was a little bit of turmoil over some trees being cut here some time ago. And I'm not saying how I feel about it, but I do know that the person involved in that work is a former legislator, and he used to direct a lot of the hazardous response and other issues of the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. He used to oversee their budget, and the comment to him was, "Could you help us with this?" And he said, "Yes, I'd absolutely like to do that after I'm out of trouble." All right, so Brian Boyce was a good friend of mine. He writes grants, I write grants. He did this grant on his own and produced a grant to Metro Enhancement process this year that was about a $20,000 grant. I was hoping he'd explain all that to you. He also put together a couple other previous grants that were not quite ready to a consulting group of engineers whose name I don't have. He would be telling you that now. Their representative is on the Parks Foundation board. They said, "We want to fund this, a lot of stuff in Waterford Park, because we're an engineering company, and we like challenges for engineering." And if there's ever challenges, they're there, okay? But they said, "We don't know about a final plan, and we don't want to just help clean up ivy. We're an engineering company. We want to do more than that." So that $40,000 grant was not approved, but the $20,000 one was. And he would be telling you now, if he was here, Ryan, that grant is to expedite the removal of the ivy, which is everywhere throughout the hillside there, off the trees, off the ground, et cetera. Initial intent was to use volunteers after a couple cleanups here, most recently with Phil Lewis and others, and Ed Lindquist, former legislator, by the way, was there. It was determined that, herbicides could do a great job here if they're applied by the right people. So Brian went to the folks that do Clackamas River Basin Council contract work, and they're all over the Clackamas River Basin area, taking care of invasives and all that. Came up with a bunch of recommendations and bids from them, and that work's going to start, I understand, this fall, and then there'll be additional work and work parties going on. And what's under there is unclear. Nessie might be buried there. We're not sure, but the place is really dynamic, all right? So the reason I'm here, we would be here tonight, was we're seeking, wherever we can, support from groups, natural resource groups and so forth, their blessing and/or a letter of support to bring together additional grants. Now that $20,000 grant's in place, that's a good way to then launch other grants because you have that matching money in place already. And he can go back, he believes, to the engineering consulting company, whose name, again, I don't know, that was going to provide the $40,000 thing, and see if we could get their interest again.
HDR, and I can't remember what HDR.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And Dee Dee's involved with the Parks Foundation, too. All right, so take a look at the second page, and this was our attempt to kind of identify the major natural resource issues. The top is east, the bottom is west, and I'm not sure which way north is on this. I think north would be to your right. But I tried to orient the aerial in a way that at least I could annotate it here. But these are the kind of things that are natural resource values that are in there. All the geologic types in this part of Oregon, except the Troutdale Formation, are visible there, including some Eocene, which are very old basalts, okay? There's a place that they occur above Willamette Falls on the way to Canby, before you get to Canby, right in the New Era area, but there are also some of them there. There are scour channels of the Ice Age floods. John Lewis and I were walking through there one day, and he said, "We got to fill that up." I said, "What? That ravine?" I said, "John." We looked at it more closely. It's an Ice Age flood channel. The same things that happened on the west side of the river in West Lynn that scoured and created the scabland that we call Camacia. That's a open environment of oak scrub savanna kind of condition up there. Over here happened, but this is north exposure, so it's a different kind of environment. It's very unique for wildflowers and things of that nature. Many of the wildflowers have been crowded out, probably because of the ivy and the overwhelming cover that is provided. So there's Ice Age flood elements in it. One time we thought the armory was going to become a part perhaps of, either stay there as a park. It looks like it might become part of the public works operation, but one way or the other, it'd be nice to have some type of simple structure to do some interpretive programs there. There's a conifer and deciduous forest, both. Brighton Overlook on your ultimate right-hand side is the most incredible views of Portland, in my opinion. And this group, have done natural history tours, I think a couple years ago on a bus. And before that, the Oregon City Trolley would stop up there for particular purposes to look at things. From there, you can see the lay of the land. You can see the Bolton Fault which is the most impressive fault in this region that created the West Hills uplift. It's lined up right with the West Hills. You can see it come across right up to Doug Nailey's favorite creek, Mount Hood Creek, or isn't that what it's called? Coming out of the old high school athletic fields.
I don't think it has a formal name.
Well,
We used to refer to it as High School Creek.
okay, that's
If you go to old maps, that
Okay.
creek used to go directly into the Willamette. It was called Cow Creek.
Right.
But I don't think it's got a formal name.
okay. Well, the fault alignment is right in that area, and
It's behind
also
my old house,
Yeah.
actually.
So that's remarkable, and then the look of the land, looking down on the cultural history of the city, that's impressive because the city has grown up on that second level. You can also see the first level, 2, and the river, and then you can see 4 mountains from there. On a clear day, not with me, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, Mount Hood, of course, and so forth. So it's pretty impressive. And Underwood Mountain Complex, which is over in Camas area, which is quite an interesting feature. So we think that everything that's bad about this place is good. Those roads that are sinking and all that, don't fix them. Build some boardwalks around them, including floating boardwalks that would just float like, not on water, but float on the asphalt and make adjustments over time where you need to because of hazard and trip hazard and such. A boardwalk, zigzag boardwalk that would, with stairs or a ramp that would take you around the slumps. This year, it dropped another 3 feet. This year. Where's this thing going? We're not sure. But it's really, really, really dramatic. Downtown. The last page of this thing, which is not as good of a copy as I'd like, shows you in the shaded area the real layout, same perspective, looking down, plan view of the park. Notice to your left, there's a lot of area shaded there that has no intention of ever being included in the Public Works design. And I also think, this is my personal bias here, and I don't mind saying it, that Public Works and geology go hand in hand because they're dealing with it every day of their life. And I really think that the Public Works Center, should it become built there, could be a major mainstay in helping us with the interpretive and other aspects. Now, there is a attorney here in Oregon City who I respect, young attorney no less, that says, I found out from some neighbors that there was a lake there. And there was a lake at the bottom of the road that comes across and down the hill and makes a turn. There's a white area in there. Norm Stewart and other volunteers put in benches there and such, but that was a small lake. And the question is, he said, could we dig it out with shovels? I said, I've done that kind of work. It's probably 500 cubic yards, but with the right kind of equipment and delicate approach, that lake could probably be reestablished. Some would say, oh my gosh, that lake, it's going to cause the whole hillside to cave away. Well, guess what? The water's still there during the winter, and that's why the whole thing is kind of creeping anyway. So the reason I'm here was to tell you that there's an effort underway by the Parks Foundation, my group, and Brian's efforts too, and Dee Dee too, to do something with this area and make an omelet out of what has been misunderstood. Out of the broken egg, we'd like to see an omelet come together. And I think that Dr. Burns said there's nothing in this part of Oregon as good as that area. Nothing that shows you so much as that one area. So schools, the college, and others could certainly use it. This Saturday, Sarah, the geology instructor, she does really high-level instruction. She's bringing students to Brighton Overlook. I'm going to be on that tour. And anyway, so that's why we're here. That's why I'm here, was to ask for your consideration maybe at a later date of a letter. We're not sure what that letter should look like. Bring a concept to you and see if you could consider it.
Have you spoken to our state representative yet? Mark?
Mr. Meek, I have not.
Yeah.
I have not, but I'm going to.
Okay.
I'm definitely going to do that. He was at a business alliance meeting, and I had a chance to talk to him about a number of things, but that's a very good idea.
Yeah.
And our state senator, too. Isn't that Mr. Alan Olson?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you get them both to support you, you've got people of both parties.
Well, it isn't if we do, it's me. I want all of us to I really think there's an opportunity
Exactly.
here. This is a really significant area, and I think Parks is now really looking at things maybe different that they might not have looked at. You'll probably have some things to say, I'm sure, your joint PrAC meeting, but I really think that they see a different approach here. One, don't maintain it, don't improve it, interpret it, as much as you can. And that geologically sensitive designation, unique geologic area, significant unique geologic area could in the future provide some funding. When I asked the people about that, they said, get your legislators to work with us. So,
But that still involves ivy removal, correct? You mean still to remove the bulk of all the ivy in there with the big plan?
yeah, it is. And,
Okay.
yeah, that's the bulk of that
I just,
$19,000
when
or
you were saying,
$20,000
don't
grant.
do it, don't improve it, I'm going, we got to get that ivy out of there. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So I just was making that clear.
Right, I think when it's all said and done, I think it will look like a boulder field. It'll look like a lava cascade off the side of Mount Hood, but it won't be the lava, the black frothy stuff. It's going to be all those boulders that are going to be so visible. So I think it's going to be a really interesting.
I think there'll be
I will
somebody-
pose a question to you that occurred to me the first time I was walking through Waterboard Park. If somebody removes all that ivy growing over the boulders, are those boulders going to start rolling down the mountainside?
You know, you're absolutely right. There's two ways to look at it. I actually asked.
I'm not suggesting
you
you don't
kidding?
remove the ivy, but yeah, I'm not suggesting you don't. remove the
You
ivy.
think that ivy's holding a 6 or 8 ton boulder? You can't
Well,
be serious.
it just came to my mind as I was walking through there.
Okay.
Well-
It's a good point, and his point was valid because I asked the question, will this possibly destabilize more? And the comment was the moisture's retained year-round because the ivy cover is so dense that there's a higher level of moisture retention in there probably than there would be otherwise because it's a natural barrier, almost like a mulch.
And
when
what
that's
impact
gone-
would that have?
Huh?
What impact would that loss of moisture have?
Well, it tends to keep it more fluid year-round.
Yeah.
And the comment was it might dry out better and be
More stable.
less active than it is.
Okay.
But I love those boulders
Oh,
coming
yeah,
off the hill
so
and
do I.
everything else.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there had to be some vegetation there before the ivy.
Oh, yeah.
There are trilliums that have a head larger than the size of this computer top, bigger, twice the size.
Right.
Just
So
amazing.
Yeah,
Listen to
sure
this.
there are.
Poking up out of that ivy.
hopefully any plan for removal of invasive species will include a plan for rehabilitation with native species.
Yeah.
That's Brian's specialty, if you know Brian, is native plants, and there's
Yes.
all sorts of opportunities
I
there.
guess it's a great place for licorice
Yeah.
fern and other things too.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
thinking a lot of it will come back. You need to come up here.
So that's what he and I want to share with you, so, okay?
Well, I
Well,
discovered the Ed Lundquist.
when you firm this out, I'm sure I've got the support from the Natural Resource Committee to actually draft a letter for it. But I think we'll have to, you have to give me some real good ideas in terms of what to put into it.
I'll have him interface with you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That'd be good. Right. And Dee Dee's done an incredible job on that Parks Foundation, getting all sorts of enthusiasm. I mean, we know this is Miss-Enthusiasm, but we don't know how far she goes. I think she's got people from the Oregon coast coming here that we don't even know about now.
Are you aware of some of the historic info that's been put together by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am. I don't know how to
Thank you
answer.
for your good pronunciation of the name, Bill. I appreciate that.
McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
There you go.
Be it noted.
I couldn't pronounce it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
McLaughlin.
At this point, we have public comments on non-agenda items. Has anybody brought in a form?
No one has signed up for public comment.
Well,
but if
I'm
they
going
wanna
to just
speak,
simply
they can.
ask if the people in the audience, would somebody want to come up and say what your interests are? Yeah, why doesn't somebody step up and say what your interests are?
We have a distinguished scout here.
Very good.
I see he brought his Portland Timber Army fan backup.
As you
That'll get you early boarding on Alaska
as you
Air.
know, public speaking is an important part of leadership.
So I'm Bobby Norton. I'm with Boy Scout Troop 133, and I'm here to get a requirement for my communications merit badge.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Neat.
So you're attending specific meetings?
I just had to attend public. I like a public meeting and.
No, but you attend, what meetings do you attend? You're here at the Natural Resource Committee. Do you attend other city meetings too?
No, this is the first I've been to. Yeah.
And what are your specific interests? Natural resources?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Okay. Well, we have several advisory committees to the city commission. This is one of them. We've got the Parks and Recreation Committee. We have a planning commission, which is not advisory; it's a decision-making body. Also the Historic Review Board, which is a decision-making body. We've got the Library Board. All of those meetings are public meetings, and if you want to get a more of a broad picture of what the city and its citizens look like, you might get online or I meet you with you afterwards if you want to, but to see if there are any of those specific areas of interest to you, because almost all of them have monthly meetings, some of them have bi-monthly meetings, and I would sure suggest at one point you would also go to a city commission meeting, because that's where all the decisions are made. Even if there are decisions made by other bodies, they can be appealed to the city commission, and that's where the elected representatives are. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you're part of your project.
I have a question.
I think it's really, I think it's really important to mention too that they are all volunteers. There are no paid committee members.
Yeah.
And the
So
Citizens
it's-
CIC,
it's
Citizens Involvement Committee.
Right.
That's who that you get every neighborhood in that room, and everyone has a voice in their neighborhood. What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in Redland, kind of. So
Maybe Holcomb Park Place on the fringe of it, yeah.
yeah.
Do you do service projects, you folks?
Yeah.
Your scout troop?
It's been a while since we've done one.
Oh, then we're putting together an Ivy Pool.
Oh,
I would like you to go back to your scout group and see what would be the optimum date to get the most volunteers out of your group, and we will serve you donuts, fresh fruit, and whatever hot chocolatey milks, and get you guys all out there for, say, 4 hours. That's what we want to hear back. we want
So
results
for
out
your
of this
communications
communication.
badge, you said this was a requirement. What other requirements for your communications badge do you have to follow?
I think I had to. It's been a while since I worked on it. I think there was one where you had to try to sell an item. Well, not sell, but you had to describe.
A sales plan
Yeah.
or
Okay.
a video sales pitch.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Kind of a marketing plan, essentially?
Yeah.
Right.
I made my boys do a presentation to OMSI.
Oh,
You
yeah.
got away easy.
Does anybody else want to
Get
come?
this
Come on
right.
up. We'd like you to come because we record all this.
All three boys here are scouts in the city.
Okay.
Well, get up in here.
If I may,
I want you to speak in the mic because we record everything, so I want to make sure we get it on.
Come on, all you scouts, come on up.
Yeah, come on up. Stop sitting, be active.
well, if I may, the requirement specifically wanted, I think they wanted the boys to attend a meeting where there were, opposing points of view on something, some topic, and the boys were supposed to jot down the notes and kind of,
The perspectives.
the
CIC
perspective.
meeting.
That's what I said. That's why I went right to the
CIC.
CIC.
There's
meeting.
a planning commission
Do
meeting.
you have any
next
suggestions
Monday.
on?
I was gonna say, planning commission would be another. probably
Yeah,
good
planning
one.
commission would be
In fact,
one
there's
too.
one coming up that should be interesting on
Yeah, it'd be very
September
interesting for
11th.
you.
Yes.
It's going to be this coming Monday
Oh, that's the hotel one.
at 7:00, and it's at the public library.
Oh, okay.
And it's a public hearing about a hotel that's proposed in downtown.
The
But
tallest
one,
building in town.
Dee Dee's mentioning a real important one that's coming up. We, like all the cities where marijuana was voted in as voted in to have dispensaries, we have specific regulations where the dispensaries have to be at least 250 feet away from a park. We have a property owner, he actually lives in Portland, but we have a property owner that wants to make a exception to that. The cemetery of Oregon City is a park, and he wants to make an exception to that. And that, is that the, what day?
September 11th.
September 11th.
September 11th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will also be a controversial issue.
Yeah, it will be. And they just gave a presentation to the Barkley Hills neighborhood last night because that's their neighborhood where they're moving into. And it was really interesting, the different views just within that room. From not wanting them to change the signage to their micro businesses that are creating other micro businesses that are rehabbing city buildings to, I want to move out of town. Neighborhood meetings are really, and that would be a good one for you to see because there are really good points brought up on all of those issues to where one moment you're going, yeah, and the next moment you go, well, of course. And they opposed each other. So that would be a really, you might want to bring your whole group,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Great.
And the CIC meetings are once a month, but I think they're not getting together until September themselves because they break for 1 month.
So that would be one where you would have a major discussion, and you probably have some division on the members of the city of the planning commission on that particular issue too. But that decision would almost whatever decision it would be would ultimately probably go to the city commission ultimately.
Yeah, that would be a planning commission decision unless it's appealed.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much, and we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, that'd be
We
cool.
want to hear
Yeah.
about the Ivy Pool, please.
Yeah, because we meet every month.
Do you have a
Thank
card?
you.
Did you have a card on you?
I just-
Let's give you
yeah, I
a
gave-
card.
I gave
One
a
moment.
copy. I gave-
Don't want to miss an
Park
opportunity.
Foundation, yeah, give them that.
See if I have it. Oh, yeah, I got one here.
Thank you.
This is me. And also, we do some things where we collect and work with some of the Boy Scouts and collecting bottles.
Okay.
So if we can't get them, we think you guys should grab them.
Write your name down there. I want, like talked about. So, right up here. How they get hold of it. Yeah. Anywhere. Yeah, just tell them to get hold of it. Because I work with scouts a lot. So,
Let me check for you real quick.
thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you go to Oregon City High?
Yeah.
Good. Which class? Are you graduating?
I graduated in 2019.
Wait.
This will get your community
Okay,
service
well,
hours
you have to get
in
on
for
the
your
meeting now.
senior.
Oh, yeah.
The Ivy Pool. Yep. And it works, it's usually have Solve involved in it
General
too. Okay, sorry.
business.
All right. Thank you.
I had to live true to my name, or reputation.
Discussion of joint PrAC and NRC work session. However, we seem to.
Where am I?
Pause for a moment. He's just trying to get him the schedule.
Yeah, take 5. Right.
So, I typed up
Yep.
at the meeting, at the work session, August 27th, we had about an hour's discussion with PrAC members there, and there was we had a PowerPoint, which I'm not going to show tonight, but we had talked about several things. We talked about heritage trees, possibility of using fines or penalties, or creating a way to pay for arborist reports. Phil Lewis was at the meeting and had discussed, there was a discussion about what a cost of an arborist report was, and I think the consensus was it's around $1,000. So there was some level of commitment there from Phil, but I believe he said they would be considering it, maybe paying for one report per year per park or something like that. But the recommendation was for each of our groups to go back and focus on what we wanted to prioritize. There was discussion of funding for signage. And ultimately, I think what we ended up with are the top three priorities for both groups. Number one was invasive species. Number two was providing funding for support of the Heritage Tree Program. And number three was signage plaques and interpretive signage for natural resources and parks. So going into a little more detail on each of these ones, as far as invasive species, Bill made the point that, do we have an inventory? Do we know how extensive the problem is? And a recommendation that we integrate with Clackamas Soil and Water District and the Weedwise program.
Well, let me make the point,
Okay.
if you will, that
Yeah.
memo I sent you today,
Yeah.
that 4-county CWMA,
CWMA, yep. And
county weed management area. It's
Yeah.
Multnomah, Clackamas, Clark, and
yeah,
Washington.
Washington.
Yeah, and they meet 4 times a year, but they also have social programs, like weed pools.
Okay. Yeah. Along those lines, I bumped into Sam Leininger from
Right.
this as I was coming down here in the parking lot, and he offered to come and talk to us at the next meeting, if you like, about the inventories that they have for Oregon City as far as weeds go. Sam Leininger with Soil and Water Conservation District,
Okay.
which is in the office below ours.
It used to be called, it's kind of a state/federal agency, but
Yeah.
it's part of the Natural Resources Conservation
Right,
Service.
NRCS, yeah.
So it's like a state agency that's strongly affiliated with a federal agency.
I was wondering, I wonder if like the OSU extension has anything along those lines either.
Good question. I don't know.
Be interested to take a look at that. Yeah, because usually those extension services have a lot to do with weeds and county.
I went to the extension service guy here when I moved into town.
Yep.
I'll just leave it with that.
Okay.
If you're interested in total organic,
Approach.
no pesticides of any
yeah.
kind or anything like that, then he might be your man. But he doesn't have anything, the guy that's here in Clackamas County, that Sam Leininger doesn't have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I've spent time with both of them and quite a bit of time with Sam.
Okay. Cool.
And that used to be one of my specialties before I retired, was invasive plant management. So I made a contact with them when I first moved here. And they have a pretty strong program. But the big thing I see around here is it's just like an arborist. There's not a dedicated weed person that knows how to identify weeds. So the number one rule of weed control is you have to know the weed,
Yeah.
because you have to know whether it's an annual, biannual, or perennial, which totally dictates how you approach the management of it. So it's a complicated topic, but I think the resources are available, and I just think John Lewis probably has a guy that needs to, or I hope is involved, and Parks probably needs a person involved. I said guy, I shouldn't have said that because
Person, we know.
yeah,
Individual.
right.
Well, I mean, the parks maintenance person is the person responsible for weed control. And that's Jonathan,
From Waverly.
yeah, Jonathan Waverly. I think and all of their people take weed management certifications on a regular basis. But I think it comes down to the point that we need a professional that, both from the standpoint of the heritage trees and perhaps from the standpoint also of dealing with weed management in the parks. I think if we're going to assign responsibilities, we would want to take on those that are specifically associated with our effort, and that would be, although we work closely with parks on many things, is to deal with this issue about an arborist.
Right.
People, I mean, a person might want to designate their tree as a heritage tree, but when you tell them the cost of having an arborist come out and to do that, it's going to be difficult. And I think if that's the case, if we're going to go ahead and make nominations of trees that are in fact in public right-of-ways, I'm not talking about parks, but I'm talking about public right-of-ways, who's going to come up with the money for that?
Right.
And of course, the budget decision has already been made, and I don't know what we could do to deal with that particular problem. One possibility that occurs to me is whether there's a mechanism for the next go-around on the Metro enhancement grants, and I think you have grants up to $25,000. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's right.
Whether we could work with both public Works Director and also the Phil Lewis, the Parks and Recreation Director, to perhaps support us, and maybe they can develop in-kind matches to a grant to the Metro Enhancement Committee to be kind of a year stopgap for us trying to get something into the next budget cycle for actually having a arborist brought on to staff, or for having some mechanism to contract with an arborist that can provide those services. And I think that was recommended earlier, that maybe some of these other cities that have an arborist, maybe would be able to use some of those services.
I kind of wondering if someone has an inroad and or could bring up the conversation with the Clackamas Community College and their arborist department that will have their first graduating class coming up in 18. They might even have somebody in the weed section that they would maybe need a mentor.
Now, would that be under the horticulture
But
program?
at a and they have and the guy, and I have his card. I don't know his name, so I don't want to butcher it. But he's the graduate from Virginia, and he's really he's put this whole arborist program together, and he was sad to see that we don't have an arborist in our city, and would really like to see one. And I think the department would be receptive, and I think if we can get a grant, we might be able to give somebody a first boost towards their education and or a little bit of a kick out the door when they graduate, if they will come and do volunteer their time to assess a group of trees that we'll have ready for them.
Seems like
I might.
it.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It seems like we should be able to develop with the college, if they're interested, a template that a student would go out and take the measurements and do the testing and all that, and it could be maybe approved by a certified arborist or whatever.
There's ways to
But it would seem like, obviously, the next step is to talk to whoever's in charge of that arborist program and go, are you interested in heritage trees as part of your arborist program?
And they are. And I've actually quoted his papers in when I talked about rainfall and stuff. And so I know would like to see some involvement. He's brand new. We need to be able to say, we brought this in front of a couple committees. Can we send a little letter from us to who's in charge of up there?
Since he's a staff person there, I'm going to request, Pete, could you make a contact?
Yeah,
I'd rather have it initially a staff to
Right.
staff.
I will
gonna
get to
suggest
his
another
card.
group
I
as
have it
well.
in my file.
I would suggest the Pacific Northwest Society of Arboriculture, which is the ISA. International Society of Arboriculture has a Pacific Northwest chapter. and they do the certifications for arborists in this area, and they have they have meetings, and they probably know of either arborists who are willing to donate time or grant funding sources. So it just occurred to me that they would be a good group to approach as well.
Sure.
That would be.
I feel like we're not going to ever get this off the ground unless we make it reasonable.
No, I
Yeah,
agree.
and
I agree.
having students getting experience.
That-
under
to
the
me,
belt.
that'd
Teacher
be
overlooked it.
fun.
It's kind of like
It'd be
going
a-
through the dental school. get your checkbook. No, I'm just saying, get your checkbooks done.
That's a whole different
not
kind of
check-
fun.
I mean-
Stevie.
Well, no, I'm just saying you have to get certain amount of
And a
things checked off.
a
in order to
comparable
get to the
program
next grade.
would
Teeth
be
have roots too.
That's right. There you go. Thank you.
in the Historic Review Board has a grant program, and you can apply for up to $2,000 to get your windows rehabilitated in a historically appropriate manner and that sort of thing. And so people know that there's a set amount every year. They know what the absolute maximum limit is, and it helps to offset the cost. So
We
I'm
wouldn't be
thinking
using that, but you're thinking about setting
similar type of
something
thing.
similar. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you would potentially be in charge of, if we set it up, and the NRC would make a recommendation on where the grant monies go. But we got to get the grant monies first. Yeah.
Right. And that'll be what occurs in May, I guess, of next year, I guess.
Okay.
Would be the next one, is my recollection.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, we need to get the discussion going now in order to get this thing going.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to contact the horticulture?
I think that's a great direction,
And
yeah.
you can, you say you supply the name.
Yeah, he was very receptive.
Yes.
And
That'd be great.
no sooner, it was so funny is that as soon as I walked in his door, just kind of cold out of the clear blue sky, Francesca did the exact same thing when she was doing the inventory of the McLaughlin neighborhood. If you knew I was saying it wrong all these years. But anyway, so she's got somewhat of an inventory done.
What she brought to us.
Right,
4
which
months
she
ago.
brought to us 4 months ago. And so he is all of a sudden being inundated by a couple of ambitious older women.
You know, she mentioned something to me
Yeah.
after the meeting about she didn't know the arboriculture industry, quote unquote, was sensitive to wildlife. I said, well, they should be, because that's where wildlife live. And Doug and I and others went through something here about 6-8 years ago when we were trying to figure out how some trees could be saved. Did they have cavity nest sites, things like that? What was driving a decision then was just the structure of the tree. Either it's healthy or it isn't. And it was a whole forest, by the way. So I called up Metro to ask them what they did. And Jim Desmond, he's no longer there, did all their acquisition. He now is the director of Nature Conservancy. Said, Jerry, we never do anything with just an arborist. We have an arborist with a background in biology or botany working with us, or we take a botanist or biologist with us to look at things, because we're looking at the whole picture, not just the structure of the tree. And so I mentioned that to Francine, and she said, well, I don't think they do that up there. So I talked to Renee Harbor, used to be in charge of horticulture, and she said, where did you get the idea that they wouldn't? I said, I don't have any idea. I'm just looking for information. So when you talk to them, I'm wondering, could you ask them if they include any wildlife considerations in what they're doing? Because I think they would.
Well, and the intent is to invite him here.
Huh? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
Then we can talk.
I mean, I don't know if that, maybe I didn't make my intent clear.
I hope that-
The intent was to have Pete make the invite to
Okay,
bring him.
good.
Yeah.
Then we could ask that, because I think it's logical.
Right.
What's his name, Dee Dee?
I have his card at home, and I have
Okay.
it taped to one of my folders, so I will get you that card
'Cause I
within
know
2
there
days.
was Bob Nelson I don't know if he's still there.
He retired
Yeah.
8 years ago.
And Bruce Nelson was the other guy that I think was involved, but in the tree subcommittee, yeah.
Yeah.
But, okay.
You mentioned the Nature Conservancy also. I know the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council has gotten grants from the Nature Conservancy
Really?
for projects. So if we can, if we could actually tie a match request to the Metro Enhancement Committee that actually had some level of match from the Nature Conservancy. That would also be helpful.
Good idea.
Second most important item was funding for heritage tree designation. We talked about that. But there was also some concern that the requirement for an arborist report was too onerous,
Yeah.
and that you should use an alternative criterion, and that would essentially mean revisiting the code.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I would like to have, maybe as the next agenda meeting,
Okay.
to actually give us the reference to the code, have us an opportunity to discuss the code at the next meeting.
I like
Is that all right?
Yeah,
Everybody?
yeah, that sounds really good.
Yep.
Oh, we can discuss it right now.
Yeah, well, I think there's some preparation that we need to do. I do want the meeting to end at 9.
Okay.
Pete, I have the gentleman from Clackamas Community College. His name is Rodney Walters.
Rodney Walters.
And
Thanks.
here comes the card.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Emails,
I am
the
French
phone number, and
bar.
all of it.
Yeah, I have
Good for you.
The other thing was we adopted a fine, but the concern was that the fine was not sufficient to be punitive for removal of a heritage tree. I think that was a decision of the city commission that came after the code was adopted. So,
You mentioned what that fine was.
Yes, I actually think it wouldn't hurt to have another 0 on there. I think it should be, you would have to weigh a real value on a tree. Because if you have a house and you want that tree to be saved, and then you purchased a house, and you know it's a heritage tree, you can say, well, I don't care, I can cut it down for $300. It's my fine. But if it's a $30,000, you have to say, the addition I'm putting on there will increase the value of my home, yes, by about $30,000 to $80,000, depending on the size of the
You
addition.
said additional 0, and you just added 2.
Well, no, I'm just, 3, 2, correct. We need 2 zeros on that. A decimal point is, we have 2 zeros.
I
But
think-
anyway, we need it to be something more like 30,000.
I think we need to be
But-
somewhat in tune to property rights too, but I agree with you, 300 is too inexpensive.
And it should reflect some value of, well, I'll give up this because I ultimately want this. And even $3,000 is not that much.
I'll offer my
Well, I
opinion
think-
at this point. If you put that on, that might be a cause for the property owner that wants to consider it as a heritage tree to actually have it as a heritage tree.
That's what I mean.
Well, we don't want to discourage property owners for putting it on as a heritage tree.
this
That
this
fee might
aspect
scare them
of it.
enough that they
Might
wouldn't
Might
do it.
scare them away.
So-
Oh,
so-
okay.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think there's some place between $300,000 and $30,000 that would probably be more reasonable and still be attractive to the property owner to do
$35,000.
And
it.
there's also, this aspect of it is a legal aspect because
Yeah.
the current covenant, the language of the covenant doesn't reference the fine. The code does.
Yes.
So when we have this discussion
Right.
next time, we need to look at both the language of the covenant and the code, both things. So, okay.
That makes sense.
Before you leave this, I couldn't be at that meeting, I'm sorry, I really would have wanted to be there. Was it a positive feeling? Were the
Oh,
two
I think it was
committees
extremely,
meeting
yes.
together?
Yeah, I think it was a very good work session.
Okay, all right. And Bill Daniels, is he on that group?
Yes.
Bill D, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds like his concern was for invasive species removal in particular. Is that,
For the funding of it, and also
funding.
the funding of a tree heritage program.
okay,
I thought that he was referring to funding of the heritage program with
okay.
fines, not invasive species.
Is that on the tape?
I haven't looked at the tape.
Yeah, might double check that just to make sure.
Okay. Well, that's good clarification.
who was their chairperson?
Their
Joyce-
chair?
Joyce Gifford.
Yeah, it's, I'll come with it.
Sorry.
Gifford? Joyce
Oh,
Gifford.
Joyce, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
And then the signage and plaques for natural resources, The emphasis would be on a broader scope to be inclusive of trees, streams, and other natural resources. So that's going to be something that we'll need to discuss in more detail.
My only caution on signage would be that I've seen it go overboard. And where the entrances to public lands look like,
Yeah.
I don't know, the entrance to a flea market or something, or a carnival from all the signs and stuff. And I think there's got to be a lot of care taken in.
Yeah, placement.
I think the signage ought to be voluntary on the property owner, whether they want it or not. I mean, they might want to show off that they have a heritage tree. On the other hand, they may not want signage on their property in general.
Oh yeah, I was down now. I was already on the parks.
Signage, yeah,
Sorry.
we're on the signage. for-
But I think it's tied to the same kind of thing.
Oh
too.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
And
Well, it's like historic homes too. They have the choice of putting those plaques up, don't they?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the plaque program is pretty much private.
yeah. It was a home, it was the old home forum, which doesn't exist, that made those plaques. But it was voluntary. I mean, they would pay. The property owners would pay for the plaque if they wanted. But that program no longer exists.
It's too bad.
Okay.
Make those signs.
So I think at the next meeting, we'll probably want to update our work plan to include anything that is on this list. And in the meantime, I'll approach these groups, Rodney Walters and the Arbor Day folks, the ISA folks, and see what kind of funding sources may be out there, as long as you guys can help with the grant writing. Okay? And that's all for that.
You had something?
Nope,
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say.
sounds good. Sounds good, the whole thing.
Are we going to have those? Try to get those two items. See if we can have the college person coming out as well as looking at our code. We
Yeah,
probably want to have the college person first. I don't think he wants to hear our debate about the code.
okay,
I doubt
yeah,
it.
sure. I'll
Debate
see if you
about
can make
which?
it. We'd also be inviting,
Oh, code.
The guy from the college,
Oh,
we
okay.
don't want
All right,
him to
right,
have
right,
to
right.
sit
so
there.
we'd also have Sam Leininger
Hearing problem.
and the folks from
For the
Soil and Water
Soil and Water.
District at the next meeting too, so there may be some synergy there.
Yeah.
And review it's section 12.32, I believe, of the city code, is the heritage tree code.
Are we discussing kind of ideas for future agenda here?
Not yet.
I wasn't
We've
sure.
got some other items on the agenda, but we can,
All right.
yeah. I don't have anything more for general business, Doug, I don't believe, unless you would,
Okay.
okay.
We have the minutes before us. Did anybody take a look at them?
I
Yep.
didn't, I'm sorry.
Good.
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I motion to pass the,
Approve the minutes?
approve the minutes, yes, that's what I.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. No second? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Great, thanks.
A little different.
Well, I like that. You know,
Communications. Let's see. So, as you're aware, there are some upcoming planning commission hearings that aren't necessarily natural resources related, but they are fairly big deals in terms of redevelopment in downtown. The Monday night hearing with Planning Commission will be for a master plan, which is a phased plan. First phase is for a Hampton Inn and Suites 5-story hotel where the 17th and Washington is, and it's by Abernathy Creek, but it's not impacting the creek corridor at all. They're not going to touch.
The overlay or anything.
Yeah, they're basically separated it from the corridor by 17th Street, which they're not going to be making any changes to 17th Street on the Abernathy Creek side of the property. They'll leave that alone, and they are making sidewalk, curb, gutter, drainage improvements to their side of it, 17th Street. So under the verification process for the Natural Resources Overlay District, they've been, part of the staff report is recommending that, we've made a finding that it's not impacting Abernathy Creek.
And that, I just might mention, Abernathy Creek, because it's a Salmon Bering Stream, has a 200-foot setback buffer, but that's for undeveloped land. And I think any area that they're looking at already has houses or PG. There's a PG transmission.
Yeah.
None of that really is all I think regarded as developed land, and therefore the code would not apply to it, the 200-foot buffer.
Right. That's correct. There's a big culvert there too that goes out to the river. So
23-foot diameter culvert.
yeah,
Biggest culvert in the world.
and then
Like that, I wouldn't make that statement.
Lengthwise.
I wouldn't make that statement. I've heard
Oh,
statements.
it used to be.
I have heard you make statements like that before, and they weren't true.
Oh, then I'll
But at
get it
23,
confirmed for you.
23-foot culvert, and it is big.
and then to the north of the site, I think it's been 4 years since the jug handle mitigation site was planted, and they've been doing yearly monitoring. So the Public Works Department has had OBEC engineers and their environmental group provide these yearly mitigation reports on how the area is coming along, and it's really grown up a lot. There's been a lot of Dana Webb in Public Works sent me the report 2 weeks ago and looked it over. If you would like to see that, I can bring it to the next meeting. It's got some good before and after photos. So when it was first planted, it looked pretty terrible and bare, the saplings, and it wasn't good establishment in the first 2 years. And then
Where
it was
are we
a
talking
big
about?
drought. Right behind the railroad.
Copeland, Trestle.
Yeah, and between
That's
the Metro Ponds.
That's Terrell led that effort.
Yeah, that was a
it's
natural
like
resource committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5-acre thing. Yeah. So they had to excavate a bunch of log debris out because it used to be an old logging deck storage area, and then create enough empty area for it to create balanced cut and fill in the floodplain, because it's used for floodplain mitigation as well, and then plant it so it's kind of a big oval. And you can't see it from anywhere, so it doesn't really have good interpretive value at this point, but it could in the future. It's had a lot of good recruitment, regeneration with some of the native trees that have been planted out there. And so they're feeling that it's better than its 80% establishment requirement because of the natural regeneration that's
And
going on now.
That property is owned by Public Works.
Yeah, and it's got one more year of monitoring, and then it will not be monitored any further after that. And that's to the north of the hotel site, but it's more than 200 feet away. So the wetland edge is more than 200 feet away from there.
There are extensive barriers there for the railroad tracks that are cyclone fences. Nothing has changed in
Right.
12 years. And it's extremely ugly.
It is.
Is there going to be some approach taken to do that differently? That cyclone fence
I don't
is so
know.
ugly.
That's a conversation that we'd have to have with Public Works, I think. Yeah, because I think just off the top of my head, these do present opportunities for interpretation and better and recreation potentially. There's always liability concerns. That's the thing, especially where the city-owned parcels and there's open water and that kind of thing, like storm ponds and that sort of thing. So,
But the Hampton Inn's development plan doesn't have to do anything there. They could partner with Public Works to make
well,
it
they're
work.
not impacting natural resources, so
Right.
they don't have to do any mitigation. Yeah. Yeah.
My point being, because they want their hotel to look good, those fences are so obvious, you know.
Right.
Greenpoint, that's the old historic Greenpoint district. Am I right about that?
I don't know.
Oh,
You mean fences abutting the hotel site?
You don't
I
know
know.
me. That's the historic Greenpoint area. It was a northern part of the city's development, and the homes in there are really kind of unusual because they faced the creek, most of them, or at least a couple. But in that Hackett House
Yeah, the
is
Hackett
a
House.
special thing.
Yeah. That
But you
was
look
part of
towards it, and all you see are these cyclone fences.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
part of
all
that is-
washed away.
Part of that is ODOT rail requirements for not trespassing on the railroad right of way, and it's very
Right.
very little pull that we
Right.
have with them.
Well, that may not be true because actually the city right-of-way was there before the Union Pacific right-of-way was there.
Yeah, we've got some ODOT comments in the record for this development that says we don't want anybody in there, you know, and we require a fence and these sorts of things. So if Public Works moves forward in the future on a different, you know, approach
Right.
to that crossing,
Right.
maybe that's a
Well, the
separate issue.
crossing was mandated for the
Yeah.
Amtrak station.
Yep, I know, I remember the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's
All right.
That's Monday night.
And that's, you said a 45, how tall is that thing, 55 feet or something?
Well, they're asking for a height adjustment because within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail Center is a 45-foot height limit. Buildings also have to be built 1 foot above the floodplain, so you automatically have a 10-foot requirement that, and a 45-foot height limit, and the hotel wants 99 rooms on a site that's only 2 acres. So that's kind of where they're going with this adjustment request. They have to mitigate it, and it's going to be a decision as to how well they've mitigated for that height adjustment. Yeah, it's about, the amount of the adjustment is 14 feet if you measure it from the flood.
And you said
base
something
flood.
about a master plan for the whole area, or
Well,
that?
the hotel's phase one. The second phase would be a mixed-use development with ground floor retail, 188 apartments, but we don't have a detailed plan for that yet.
Within the hotel footprint?
Out, just to
Within the project.
to the north of the hotel.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
that's phase two. So, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Anybody else speaking for the good of the order on anything before we come to the future agenda items? You'll have to excuse the fact that I'm going to make a recommendation. On the 15th, the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council and the Oregon City Women's Club are the recipients of a $1 per drink at the Oregon City
Wow.
Brewery.
I will be there on that Tuesday and support you.
Tuesday.
Yes,
I will-
That
so-
brought,
I'll
that
come too.
brought
So it was.
Oregon City Parks Foundation.
It was, I will say this, it's a humorous story. I got up and announced this for the Great Oregon City Watershed Council at the chamber meeting. And immediately, the Oregon City Women's Club person came up, well, we're having ours on that day. And so we did some calling, and what happens is actually the Great Oregon City Watershed Council approved it. However, the Oregon City Women's Club initials differ by ours by only the first letter, G. They made the request, and apparently they were told, well, no, it's already been done. And so we agreed to between us to share the monies, and the benefit was that we're also going to have the next month their charity day will go to both groups too. So we'll have 2 events. So I'll announce the second event next month.
there you go.
15th?
What's the time?
5 is when they
5 is
actually,
when they stood, the
and then all the way to
donations
closing, which is probably 11 or something.
start. The 15th?
The 15th,
It'll be
yeah,
a Tuesday.
it's coming Tuesday.
All right, good.
So that's an announcement.
They do it every single Tuesday. They do a nonprofit, and they try to stay local.
Yeah.
That's a really considerate contribution given by business.
Yes, I think so,
Locally, and hands, we should, loud applause,
Yeah.
because if we had 5 other businesses doing that.
We can all go there that night and
Oh, I-
applaud.
And I posted on our, when whoever's they're doing, I posted on our Facebooks on Oregon City Parks Foundation.
So any other
Yep, we'll be
announcements or anything of that nature in terms of things you've done in the last month?
I have to meet Pete about, we're starting to clean up Clackett Cove adjoining lands under a grant. And I need to meet with you, just make sure everything's up to snuff. But Phil Lewis and myself and John Waverly are looking forward to see something happen. And I was looking at all the places that we used to keep clean, and it's like, you know, I was in that area for 24 years, and then I had to leave because Gladstone didn't like anybody that liked the former mayor. And so they got rid of everybody, fired everybody that had to do with the former. They couldn't fire me, but I had a lease. That's okay. So now the council's telling me we made a mistake. I said, well, yeah, you did, because now you have, 7 homeless camps inside your fence and 20 more outside the fence. And we found
And a poacher. I found poaching material.
is that right? So we found a lot of that today. So a lot of stuff that, anyway, we're going to get busy and clean it up. And I'm going to keep everybody informed because I'm going to do, like what you do, a lot of community involvement down there because it's going to be a beautiful site. And then John Runyon called me today, and he just signed a contract with the city, about this, to advance the mitigation strategies that we all talked about in the cove.
Portland Harbor Fund
Yep,
mitigation.
in the cove.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing. He'll be advising us on what we're doing too, to make sure we're not, I wouldn't mess it up anyway, but getting into areas that are significant natural area potential.
So the second phase of the cove.
Pardon?
The second phase of the cove would be starting to, but the third phase of the cove is the rehabilitation phase.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the second phase, which is the apartments now being built?
Right, it's supposed to be the area directly adjacent to the water, and they wanted to, we had a pre-application conference with
Are we
them.
talking about the area on the east side of the cove now?
Yeah.
Not the garden apartments, but,
Right.
yeah.
Not the garden apartments.
Yeah.
Right. And includes, it's a little, it's still in the design phase, but they're talking about how they want to design the parking because there's concern about how much on-street parking they need and how much, and what happens during a flood event and how much warning people would need to get out of there. So those are concerns that are not zoning code related, but they are related to the safety of the buildings for the floodplain regulations and things like that. And so that's going on. But it involves, I think, Jerry, 8 different types of mixed-use buildings. The majority of those are apartments, but 2 of the buildings have retail in them and office space.
That's the second phase we're talking about.
Second phase, yeah. And a significant increase over the previous phases that were approved as far as apartment numbers are concerned, but the overall traffic impact is less because there's less retail proposed in this phase than prior. That's what we discussed during the pre-application conference. So,
And a total concrete foundation underneath all the buildings on the east side instead of massive fill? Is that?
I don't know all the details as far as engineering goes at this point. I think we're going to have another pre-application conference before we're even close to getting an application here. There aren't enough details at this point. Yeah.
Which would reduce the need for so much cove contouring, was what I was hearing.
Right. The landscaping aspect of this is still very much undetermined.
Let me ask you, does this go through the planning commission?
Yeah, it'll have to go to the planning commission because it's an amendment to
Capability
the,
of finding out.
it's amendment to the previous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So, and it'll be very likely coming before you all too.
Yeah.
Because the natural resource overlay district application would be amended
makes
as
sense,
well. Yeah.
Any other thing before we go into agenda items? Future agenda items then.
Okay. So it looks like we've got 2 presentations, hopefully by Rodney Walters. I will invite him and Sam Leininger. We'll be reviewing the Heritage Tree Code sections that have to deal with what we talked about earlier. it sounds like John and the PGE gentleman, Kevin, wanted to actually come back with a presentation.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
could have that that time afterwards, not a,
Yeah.
I mean,
Two months.
the code's gonna take up, I think, a
Yeah, a fair
considerable
amount of
amount of time,
Okay.
so I don't think we on it.
So that's quite a bit. Is there anything else people want to put on the future agenda? Or
Are
next
you
agenda?
going to send out the code with the agenda prior to the meeting so we can have
Okay,
time to
yeah,
review it?
yeah.
Read it over?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can go to the city website
Yeah.
under the municipal code and just look up 12.32.
12.32, okay.
Yeah. That's
12.32 under municipal
I
code.
think
so
there's
we can-
quite a bit of written material on the Heritage Tree Program, isn't there?
yeah.
How was
There's
that
a
at
there's a
all?
web page. It's and it has a link to the code as well, and it has a copy of the covenant that we have as well.
I haven't read it in a long time.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be possible, since we're speaking with, I know it's different, with the Clackamas Community College and the Arborist, do you think, and we're looking at possibly public lands as the first ones to nominate, we also might see if maybe West Rogers with the school district
good idea.
might be able to do it, because we can make projects on the school grounds
That's a very good idea.
and get those beautiful oaks right off the bat at Easton School. But our
I
school
don't know if we
grounds
want to do
often
that.
have nice big
I regarded
beautiful
this agenda meeting as resources that we might be able to tap
trees. Right.
and in terms of education. That is a resource.
But
no question
he
that.
would have to give any approval to even look at a tree and say if he would be receptive to it. So he
Yeah.
would be the first
Right.
point of
Yeah,
contact.
So,
Their
but we
board.
might,
Another card.
we might want to hold that as a different agenda item, though, on a
Yeah,
different
see
day.
if we can get some of these other resources shored up before we
Yeah.
move on to
Okay.
nominating others.
Right.
Trees.
Okay.
Yeah, I've quit.
Well, that's good. That's a lot of good stuff.
And you said you had something.
Sometime in the future, I'd love to see us bring in somebody that could give us a broad overview of the sea lion issue. And I know who that person is. I believe that's Bill Monroe, who's been covering this stuff for a long time in the newspaper, who has a introspective way of looking at it. And now you probably noticed the latest thing was the endangered
Steelhead.
That was a
steelhead.
big article
And,
today. Yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
this,
been
this
all
year I
over the
had
press.
2 sea lions jump in my vessel and nearly sink it. If it hadn't been slung, it would have sunk. And 48 other ones outside it. And a sea lion trap that NOAA owns sitting there on a barge where it's been for 2 years because nobody's doing anything. So the reason I feel this is important is that now the rubber meets the road. Now you've got an already endangered species that's going to potentially go extinct while there's no management plan. And it just seems
It is.
very
It's
unfortunate.
gone.
Very unfortunate.
The Willamette steelhead's probably gone.
You think it's gone?
Oh, yeah. 530 fish this year?
I don't know what's been in the past. I
Yeah,
wouldn't
it's,
follow.
They said-
5,000?
Yeah.
Okay. But
That's,
now we got,
that's a super low number for this
Well,
big of a
How
watershed.
many years in the ocean are they?
they go
Well,
back and
1 to
forth.
3.
Don't they go
Yeah,
back and forth?
they go back and forth.
Yeah, I understand that, but they'll be out in the ocean how long? The reason, I was thinking more of the juveniles going out because 2015 was a deadly year for juveniles.
10% of snowpack out
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Right.
so, and if that might correspond to the bad, partly correspond to the bad
It
steelhead
could
return.
partly be, but I don't think it is. Those fish would still be pretty small, and they're talking about the size of steelhead that they can count going through the ladder.
Well, yeah, but these would be 2 years in the ocean.
Yeah. Oh,
Well, the reason I bring it up is that now the sturgeon population is really suffering too, because the sea lions have shifted to the juveniles, 2 to 1.5 to 3 feet or so, that or 4.
So are you requesting us to get somebody to speak to the issue?
Yeah, and if the staff would be willing to talk to Bill Monroe, he's also the president of the Clackamas River Basin Council and a really effective person. And I think he'd give us the broad overview. He's not going to tell us how it's going to get solved, but he can tell you what the concerns are. I think it's going in the direction that there may be lawsuits that will be successful, like with the wolf issue, that ranchers have a right to super damages. And I think that may be coming, I could be, I don't know, I'm sensing, I'm hearing that. But
well, it's like only treating part of the symptom to
Right.
treat the sea lions.
Right.
Because it goes way beyond just sea lions. I
Okay.
mean, the biggest part of the problem is dams.
Right.
And
Willamette
then
Falls is a natural feature.
above Willamette Falls, are there 0 dams above Willamette
13
Falls?
dams above the falls,
Okay.
on tributaries only.
Well, yeah, but.
That's still an issue.
That's where the spring should occur, spawn.
Right.
And
True.
most of
I'm not
those,
saying I'm, you know.
yeah, most of them don't have fish
Yeah,
passes.
it's
Right.
the sea lion, and I am not sticking up for sea lions at all. They're just extremely visible.
Right.
In my opinion, ODFW is really dropping the ball. They should have been on top of this
Right.
much sooner.
Right.
They're doing a little, they're trying to blame it on other things,
Right, right.
pass the buck.
And that will be the topic for another agenda.
Exactly.
In the future, not a rush job here, but.
And then there's the Marine Mammal Protection
Yes.
Act.
Yes, I know.
And that's actually going in front of Congress.
Thanks to Ellen DeGeneres, and her cohorts, it's just too strict.
And
Sounds like you
with
know.
that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Good.